Everyone loves a closed tube station. Millions of people use the London Underground, and the idea that there are secret bits of it that no one gets to see is a very compelling one. In fact, the London Transport Museum runs very popular tours of some of those abandoned bits. The Piccadilly line has an awful lot of closed stations. The reason for this is because its builders were over-optimistic as to just how many they'd need when they were planning the line back at the beginning of the 20th century. In central London they built stations very close together, and often not in the most useful, convenient, or even visible locations. One station's catchment area might well overlap with that of the next one along the line. In the 1930s, the Piccadilly line underwent a programme of extension and modernisation, and as part of that, its owners took the opportunity to divest themselves of some of their most unremunerative and, let's be honest, pointless stations. Now, just to clarify, I'm only covering stations that have completely closed. For instance, Hyde Park Corner has a disused building here, but the station is still very much in use. I'm also not including renamings or resightings. Well, my rule with resighting is, if the location was far enough from the original to warrant a name change, it gets covered. So, Osterley's in, Hillingdon's out. I'd do that smug but unimaginative social media thing of saying, sorry, I don't make the rules, but I actually do make the rules in this case. Also, I feel no sense of sorrow. Let's start in the north. Now, the northern end of the Piccadilly line, beyond Finsbury Park, was actually only constructed in the 1930s, and as a result there are no closed stations there. Apparently, closing Manor House was contemplated during the planning stages of the Victoria line, but that's as close as it got. I should also give an honourable mention to this London Underground building at Colina Road, which seems likely to have been the planned site of a station called St Anne's Road. It never got built, or even got past the planning stages, it seems, but things were solid enough that they had some land here. But instead of a station, they built a ventilation shaft. From Finsbury Park to Hammersmith, the line opened in December 1906, and that's where most of the abandoned stations are located. The first station we come to is York Road. York Road was one stop north of King's Cross, on the edge of what was known as the Railway Lands. The area was very industrial and very poor. The residents were more likely to take the tram, the bus, or to walk into town. So the station was always poorly patronised. From 1908, some services skipped it altogether, and in 1932 it was closed down. The railway lands were the location of the goods depot serving King's Cross Station. Once that closed down, the area became somewhat notorious. It's recently been redeveloped, and as part of that redevelopment it was proposed to reopen York Road at various points between 2006 and the present day. However, Transport for London have rejected this on the grounds that it would slow trains down on the busy Piccadilly line. Aldwych, or Strand, is quite possibly the best-known abandoned tube station. Firstly, because it's located firmly within the heart of London's West End, along one of its busiest streets, Strand. Secondly, because it tends to get used a lot for filming. And thirdly, because it only closed a little over 30 years ago. The line to Aldwych branches off the main Piccadilly line at Holborn, and for most of its life it was worked as a shuttle service. There were several reasons why it wasn't popular. It was very close to Temple on the District and Circle lines. It wasn't far from Charing Cross and Trafalgar Square stations on the Northern and Bakerloo lines, respectively. It was well served by trams. And to be honest, it wasn't even that far from Holborn. There were several ideas to incorporate it into other schemes, to attach it to a Jubilee line extension, to extend the branch to Waterloo, and latterly even to turn it into part of an underground cycle route. But none of these came to pass. It closed in 1994 when the station required refurbishment, and London Transport decided it wasn't worth it. Next up, Down Street. This is another contender for most famous abandoned station. Its entrance is kind of hard to see, being on a side street away from the main road. It was opened slightly later than the rest of the line, on the 15th of March 1907. Down Street had the opposite problem to York Road. Around here, the residents were too rich to sully themselves with subterranean trains. It also had to compete with the nearby Hyde Park Corner and Green Park stations. The Piccadilly line stations had initially opened with lifts to take passengers to platform level. Escalators are better at moving large numbers of people, so it was decided in the 1920s to replace the lifts at the busiest stations with this more efficient mode. However, because lifts are vertical and escalators are diagonal, that meant moving a lot of the entrances. At Green Park, then known as Dover Street, the entrance was moved to the west. This put it even closer to Down Street, and so Down Street was taken down in 1932. It saw a lot of use during the war as the headquarters of the railway executive. It even temporarily housed the Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, though I should say that it was very temporary. Brompton Road was so notorious for its poor service that it gave its name to a play, Passing Brompton Road. It was between South Kensington and Knightsbridge. South Kensington is a busy station with a lot to see. Knightsbridge is a busy station with a lot to see. Brompton Road, well, not so much. So passengers tended to avoid it. I get the impression that the Underground group wanted to close it long before they actually did. Trains would often skip it, much to the frustration of the passengers that did use it, and no doubt that made it even less popular. In 1926 it was closed due to the general strike, and it wasn't reopened for 5 months. As with Down Street, it was the rebuilding of a neighbouring station that prompted its final end. In this case, the rebuilt station was Knightsbridge. That being said, it lasted 2 years longer than Down Street or York Road, finally closing its gates in 1934. Now all trains are passing Brompton Road. And now, I think we should head out into the suburbs. Technically, Park Royal and Twyford Abbey was never a Piccadilly line station. It was built on the Ealing and South Harrow Railway, which to all intents and purposes was a branch of the District Railway. But because there were so many branches of the District Railway, in the 1920s the Underground group decided to hand 2 of the branches over to the Piccadilly line. This was one of them, and is now the Piccadilly line route to Uxbridge. When Park Royal and Twyford Abbey opened in 1903, this area was basically the countryside. The only thing of note in the area was the Royal Agricultural Showground, and that was why this station even existed. The reason you can't see anything today is because it was very basic. Wooden platforms, corrugated iron shelters. The area did see development, but further to the west. Therefore it was decided to close Park Royal and Twyford Abbey and replace it with Park Royal. That opened in 1931, and Park Royal and Twyford Abbey was closed at the same time. Nothing remains. The other branch that got handed over to the Piccadilly line was the branch to Hounslow Barracks, better known today as Hounslow West. And that brings us to our next station, Osterley and Spring Grove. This opened in 1883, hoping to take advantage of traffic to, well, Osterley Park and Spring Grove. Spring Grove was a housing development, but not a very successful one. As the suburbs developed, more and more passengers used the station. It became too successful for its own good, in fact. It was clear that it would need to be rebuilt. London Underground decided that rather than rebuild, they'd close it down altogether and build a new one on the Great West Road. The new Osterley station opened in 1934, bringing the end of Osterley and Spring Grove. That's all the abandoned stations on the Piccadilly line, or on track that became the Piccadilly line. I will make some more honourable mentions, though. There were 3 other tube stations that narrowly escaped closure in the Piccadilly purge. One was Gloucester Road, which saw more patronage from the District line than the Piccadilly. Another was Covent Garden, which was seen as overlapping with Leicester Square and was not, as it is now, located in a major tourist district. And the third was Gillespie Road, which since 1932 has been called Arsenal. That was very busy on match days, but at other times was embarrassingly quiet. All three of these stations have since seen enough of an increase in passenger numbers to justify keeping them. I might also mention Hounslow Town. This was never part of the Piccadilly line and was never even on a section of line that became the Piccadilly. It was located on a little stub off what's now the Piccadilly line, just east of Hounslow East. This was built in 1883 for the District Railway, with the aim of extending the line to meet the London and South Western Railway at Twickenham, on the branch to Kingston. The London and South Western Railway had other ideas, and the scheme never went ahead. Rather than go to Twickenham, the district decided to build a line to the west, leaving Hounslow Town as a stubby little branch. As a result, it became a little bit pointless and was closed in 1909. So not only did it never see Piccadilly trains, but its existence barely overlapped with that of the Piccadilly line. The site of the station is now Hounslow Bus Station. And that's all of them. All of the closed stations on the Piccadilly line, and more besides. It's enough to make a fellow feel a little blue. Well, I do hope you enjoyed this over-catered tale from the tube. If you did, please do leave a like, and it would be very pleasant if you'd subscribe if you haven't already. I would like as ever to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your generous support. You are the better location to my poorly situated station. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.